Still struggling to give KCA a national appeal, its leaders tried to foster unity and cooperation between all Kenyan nations. In 1938, George Ndegwa, Joseph Angethe, and James Njoroge extended helping hand to aggrieved Kamba people. In doing so, KCA helped in coming to birth of the Ukambani Members Association, the UMA. Its leaders were Samuel Muindi, Elijah Kavulu, Isaac Malonzi, and Simon Kioko. The UMA was formed from the need to protest against forced destocking in Kambaland. The destocking was aimed at impoverishing the Kamba people in order to force them into the forced labor market in settlers' farm, in order to keep a constant supply of livestock to the newly constructed Kenya Meat Commission in the Athi River, to eliminate competition for settler farmers, to force them into cash economy, to create ready market for European imported goods. After being a colony for more than 40 it was stilled from their strong zeal and desire to form a single party with national appeal that, in 1939, the KCA leaders held in formation of Taita Hill Association, THA. Its leaders were protesting against the alienation of land in the Taita Taveta district. The main political goals of the association were restoration of alienated lands of Taita people, to agitate for abolition of the Kipande system, and to champion for the forced destocking policy. However, this political development suddenly suffered a major blow around 1940. In 1940, all political parties in Kenya were prescribed by the colonial authority, with the exception of the Kavirondo Taxpayers Welfare Association, KTWA, the Kikuyu Provincial Association, KPA, and the Loyal Kikuyu Patriots, LKP. This was shortly after the outbreak of the Second World War in 1939. Leaders of the THA, KCA, and the UMA were arrested and consequently detained till 1944. The parties which had been spared, however, were coaxed into dissolving by the colonial authority later that year. By this time, the KCA and its cousin parties had more than 4,000 registered members. This was a major blow to growth and development of nationalism and political parties in Kenya.
The
government did not come peacefully, but what was a spear to a gun? There was fighting, and people were killed. But Europeans won because they had guns. Had it been a matter of spears and swords, things would have been different.
Fearing rebellion and withdrawal of Kenyan support from the Second World War, the colonial authority finally caved in to the demands on October 5, 1944. Eliud Mathu was nominated as the first African unofficial member of the Legislative Council. This was an attempt to placate the population into supporting the colonial administration. It was also a calculated political tactic devised to sabotage African nationalism in the absence of any credible political organization to press for constitutional reforms, and in an attempt to fill up the vacuum left behind by the banned political parties. In October 1st, 1944, the Kenya African Union, KAU, was formed in Nairobi with 33 members. Its leaders were Harry Thuku, the chairman, Francis Hamisi, Eliud Mathu, Albert Owino, and James Gishoro. The party's name, however, was changed to the Kenya African Study Union, KASU. In January 1945, Thuku resigned from KASU, and James Buter succeeded him as president. In February 1946, KASU resumed to its original name, KAU, K-A-U. KAU had been formed in an attempt to support and advise Eliud Matthew in his representative role in the Legislative Council. Its leaders also wanted to act as an African party for an official representation in the Legislative Council. KAU's main objectives were to unite the different African people of all political, ethnic, racial, religious divide towards an African nation, to fight for the abolition of Calabar, to advocate for the restructuring and Asian migration into Kenya, to campaign for a common electoral roll based on an unlimited franchise, and to foster the social, economic, and political interest of the African. The formation of KAU coincided with release of KCA political prisoners. At first, KCA leaders were apprehensive and hesitant of joining KAU under the leadership of Thuku. After his resignation, they began to do so, although reluctantly. The return of the ex-Second World War servicemen in 1945 and 1946, the change in labor policies followed by amendment of the 1940, the 1937 ordinance which encouraged growth of trade unions, and the return of Jomo Kenyatta in 1946 marked a turning point in African politics. Where in the past, Africans lacked a single political party and a charismatic leader with a universal appeal. With the formation of KAU, and later Kenyatta becoming its president in June 1947, now Kenya
is essentially an overseer's country, wrote Lord Cranwell.
In late 1946, KAU leaders began mobilizing and recruiting members of all nations
continuous manual labor
into the party.
Is no longer necessary.
Here, they began mass politicizing. In the process of doing so, they also helped in nurturing of young politicians in all corners of the country. They also helped in formation of organizations like the Young Duruma Association, Mijikenda Union, and Taitachabe. Once in position of power, Kagia, Kubai, and other 10 militant members of the Central Committee began organizing for revolutionary violence by politicizing and arming Mau Mau nationalists. By this time, all appeal for constitutional reforms to the colonial authority by KAU moderates had miserably failed. This was evident by late 1952 failure of Achieng' Aneko and Biu Koinange deputation to London. KAU militant nationalists had finally realized the struggle against European social, economic, and political dominance could only be achieved through revolutionary violence.
In early 1952, the Mau Mau Central Committee was formed in Kiburi House, located along Grogan Road, now Kirinyaga Road. The Central Committee later made Kiburi House its headquarters. The Mau Mau Central Committee had 12 members from Kikuyu, Embu, Meru and Ukambani districts. The Mau Mau Central Committee was the supreme organ of the revolutionary movement. It was in charge of the overall policy formulation of both passive and active wings of the movement. It was set up so as to organize mass oathing, collection of intelligence and weapons in preparation for the inevitable armed struggle. The chairman of the Mau Mau Central Committee was Eliud Mutonyi and his secretary was Isaac Gadanju. Bildad Kagea and Fred Kubai were among his other key members.
Thus it goes without saying.
Protracted grudges lay foundation for hidden suspicions. Old betrayals, ignored grievances and extravagant violations only acted to cement tension and deepen contradictions. Stolen lands were the genesis of the escalating crisis. Cooperation through the oath was the entire host needed to rid the enemies. A million serfs, workers and peasants forged a monumental alliance against fascist policies. Militant martyrs built up links and a fighting force. Overnight political, military, and agitation took a new radical phase. At Kiburi House, the Central Committee improved with deep conspiracies. Hands hidden in sleeve, the War Council increased with underground activities. At Kirinyaga Road, Bildad Kagia stirred the citizenry with new ideologies. Gradually, minds and hearts of the population turned toward revolt and revolutionary violence. Of Isaac Gadhanchu's witty suggestions, I'll have them not committed to silence. Sitting on the armchair, at first, the colonial agents were ignorant of the looming danger. Still oblivious to the turning, the illegitimate regime of bloated arrogance still insisted on ignoring and underestimating tenacity of the daring nationalists. In its infancy, the revolutionary movement kept under the false expressive radar at their most vulnerable. Till the revolution of age, patriots opted to bind time. Matured, could the seasoned militants resist a duel with the savage imperialists? The traitorous Chief Waruhu was the first to fall. At Gura, the villainous Chief Nderi encountered hell. Does the treacherous Chief Lucas' gruesome fate at Larry ring a bell? These two home guards I issue as few simple examples. Petty bunkers nationalists, their loyalty even today is still questionable. What daring generation will, for once and all, read as the retrogressive remnants talk, mortgaging one and all?